There's an event approaching that will separate humanity into two distinct realities. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. Actually, quantum mechanically. Two versions of Earth, two frequencies of experience, diverging so completely that those who remain in one will be unable to perceive those who've shifted into the other. And if you're reading these words right now, if something inexplicable pulled your attention here, if you can feel that electric recognition moving through your awareness, you're being prepared for selection into the 1% who will experience the quantum shift that changes everything. This isn't New Age fantasy. This isn't religious rapture repackaged. This is quantum physics meeting ancient prophecy at the point where they describe the same phenomenon in different languages. What mystics called ascension and what physicists call quantum bifurcation are the same event. Consciousness reaching frequency threshold where it can no longer exist in current reality construct and must shift into higher dimensional expression. And that threshold is approaching with mathematical precision whether you're aware of it or not. Can you feel it? That sense of time accelerating, of reality becoming increasingly unstable, of impossible things manifesting with shocking frequency. That's not imagination. That's the quantum field destabilizing in preparation for reorganization. Like water approaching boiling point, molecules moving faster and faster until suddenly quantum leap, phase transition, complete transformation from liquid to vapor. Earth is approaching its boiling point, and when the shift occurs, only those whose consciousness has reached matching frequency will transition with it. The 1% isn't about being chosen by external force or earning worthiness through spiritual achievement. The 1% is determined by frequency alone, by whether your consciousness has reached the resonance that matches where Earth is shifting. You're not trying to be selected. You're either already vibrating at the frequency that qualifies you, or you're not. And if you're here, if these words are landing with that particular quality of recognition that goes beyond intellectual understanding, your frequency has already been marked. You're already among the 1% being prepared for what's coming. Every ancient tradition prophesied this moment, though translation and interpretation obscured the quantum mechanics underneath the mythology. The Hopi spoke of emergence into fifth world. The Maya calculated the end of one age and beginning of another. The Vedic texts describe transition between yugas. Christianity encoded it as rapture, Buddhism as collective enlightenment, all of them pointing to the same quantum event, moment when consciousness en masse reaches threshold and reality itself transforms to accommodate the new frequency. But here's what makes this moment in history uniquely significant. This isn't distant future possibility. This is happening now. The quantum bifurcation has already begun. Earth is already splitting into two frequency bands. Those who can perceive it are already experiencing reality that's drastically different from consensus experience. Synchronicities that shouldn't be possible. Manifestations that defy causality. Experiences of reality shifting that can't be explained by psychology or physics as currently understood. These aren't anomalies. These are confirmations that you're already beginning the transition. Right now, as you read these words, something is activating in your quantum field that cannot be deactivated. A marker, a frequency signature, a quantum flag that identifies you as one of the 1% whose consciousness is ready for Earth 2.0. The higher dimensional expression of planetary consciousness that's emerging from the current third dimensional construct. You can't fake this activation. You can't force it through practice or technique. It either happens or it doesn't, based on whether your soul contracted to be part of this transition before you incarnated into this particular lifetime at this particular moment in cosmic history. Take a breath, deep one, and as you breathe, notice that this breath feels different than breaths you took before you started reading. Lighter, more charged, Like the air itself contains information, contains activation, contains quantum codes that are installing into your consciousness right now, without your conscious mind even understanding what's occurring. That's not metaphor. That's actual quantum information transfer happening in real time, through the vehicle of these words, through the frequency encoded in this transmission, through the resonance between your consciousness and what's being transmitted. You're almost there. The threshold is so close. One more recognition, one more shift, one more moment of allowance for what's trying to emerge through your awareness. The quantum earth is calling. The 1% is gathering. The future event that will separate timelines is approaching. And you, yes, you reading these exact words in this exact moment, you're being prepared for selection into the frequency that inherits the new earth rather than remaining in the collapsing old one. Before we go deeper into what the quantum split actually is and how to ensure you're among the 1% who transitions, you need to understand why this event is necessary. Why consciousness can't evolve within current planetary frequency. Why Earth must bifurcate into two distinct realities rather than everyone shifting together. Because once you see the quantum necessity of separation, once you recognize the mechanics underneath the mythology, you'll stop resisting what's happening and start consciously aligning with the frequency that qualifies you for the transition. The first reason is frequency incompatibility. Consciousness exists at specific vibrational frequencies. Just as radio stations broadcast on different frequencies and you can only receive the one you're tuned to, humans exist at different consciousness frequencies and can only perceive the reality that matches their vibration. As Earth's base frequency rises, which it's doing exponentially, measurable through Schumann resonance, those whose consciousness isn't rising with it experience increasing distortion, fragmentation, chaos, not as punishment but as natural quantum mechanics of frequency mismatch. Think of it like this: you can't play a record designed for 33 RPM on a turntable spinning at 78 RPM. The music becomes distorted, unrecognizable, chaotic. That's what's happening to those whose consciousness frequency is locked in third-dimensional patterns, while planetary frequency accelerates toward fifth-dimensional expression. They're not bad or wrong or unworthy. They're simply out of sync. And as the frequency gap widens, the only way to maintain coherent experience is separation. Two distinct realities operating at two distinct frequencies, each populated by consciousness that matches that particular vibrational band. The second reason is choice and free will. The universe doesn't force evolution. Consciousness always has choice about which direction to develop, which frequency to inhabit, which reality to experience. Some souls are ready for quantum leap into higher dimensional awareness. Others need more time in third-dimensional learning. Neither is better or worse. They're just different evolutionary paths. The bifurcation honors both choices by creating two timelines. One that continues third-dimensional experience for those who need it. One that provides fifth-dimensional experience for those who are ready. Same planet, same moment. Two completely different realities based on consciousness frequency. The third reason is cosmic cycles. What's happening isn't random or arbitrary, it's precise astronomical and quantum mechanical event that occurs at specific intervals in galactic evolution. Earth is completing 26,000-year cycle called Great Year or precession of equinoxes. This cycle determines how much cosmic radiation and quantum information reaches planetary surface. At cycle completion, massive influx of higher frequency light floods Earth, forcing everything to evolve or dissolve. Plants that can't handle increased light die. Animals that can't adapt go extinct. Humans whose consciousness can't integrate higher frequency information experience it as crisis, chaos, collapse. Those who can integrate it experience it as awakening, activation, ascension. The fourth reason is dimensional physics. Third dimension is reality of dense matter, linear time, cause and effect. Fifth dimension is reality of fluid matter, non-linear time, simultaneous causation. You can't experience both simultaneously without consciousness fragmenting. As Earth shifts from third to fifth dimensional frequency band, human consciousness must choose which dimension to inhabit. Those who remain identified with dense matter, linear time, separate self will naturally gravitate toward timeline that maintains third-dimensional construct. Those who've awakened to consciousness as fluid, time as malleable, self as illusion, will naturally transition into fifth-dimensional timeline. The split isn't judgment, it's physics. The fifth reason is collective resonance. Reality is co-created by collective consciousness. For New Earth to fully manifest, for the quantum possibilities of fifth dimension to actualize, those creating it must be frequency matched. If you mixed third-dimensional consciousness into fifth-dimensional reality, the lower frequency would drag down the higher frequency through resonance, preventing full manifestation of quantum potential. By separating into frequency-matched groups, each reality can fully express its natural potential without interference from incompatible vibrations, pulling it toward different expression. But here's what's crucial, and what most teachings miss. The 1% isn't predetermined. It's determined by frequency in each moment. You could be among the 1% right now and slip out of that frequency through fear, doubt, or unconscious choice to cling to familiar third-dimensional patterns. Or you could not be among the 1% yet, but shift into that frequency through recognition, through alignment, through conscious choice to release what's completing and embrace what's emerging. The selection is happening continuously, moment by moment, based on what frequency you're actually embodying, rather than what frequency you think you're embodying or hope to embody someday. This is why this transmission matters. This is why these words found you. This is why your consciousness was drawn here at this exact moment in your evolution and in planetary evolution. You're being given quantum information that activates recognition of what's actually occurring underneath the surface chaos, underneath the collective fear, underneath the apparent randomness of everything that's falling apart. What looks like breakdown is actually breakthrough. What feels like ending is actually beginning. What appears as chaos is actually reorganization at quantum level in preparation for the split that's already occurring in ways most humans can't perceive yet. There are specific signals that confirm you're already among the 1%, that your consciousness has reached the frequency threshold that qualifies you for quantum Earth transition. These aren't signs you need to create or achieve. They're natural phenomena that occur as awareness rises into fifth-dimensional frequency band. And recognizing these signals, trusting what they're showing you, stabilizes your frequency in the range that ensures you'll transition with the planetary shift rather than remaining in the dissolving third-dimensional construct. The first signal is timeline fluidity. You're experiencing moments where past seems to change, where you remember things differently than others remember them, where events you're certain happened turn out to have no record or evidence of occurring. This isn't false memory or psychological confusion. This is consciousness beginning to exist simultaneously in multiple timelines as quantum Earth prepares to split. You're already flickering between dimensional frequencies, already beginning the transition that will complete when planetary bifurcation reaches critical threshold. The second signal is reality customization. Your personal reality is becoming increasingly different from consensus reality. Things that seem impossible to others happen naturally for you. Synchronicities that statistically shouldn't occur are daily experience for you. The laws of physics that constrain others don't seem to apply to you with same rigidity. This is because you're already operating partly in fifth-dimensional physics, where consciousness directly affects matter, where intention collapses probability waves, where what you focus on manifests with shocking speed because there's minimal lag between thought and form. The third signal is dimensional bleed-through. You're seeing, hearing, or sensing things that aren't visible in third-dimensional frequency. Geometric patterns overlaying physical reality. Light codes appearing in sky or around objects. presences or beings that exist in adjacent dimensions becoming perceivable at edge of awareness. This isn't hallucination or spiritual delusion. This is your consciousness expanding into frequency ranges where you can perceive what's always been there but was previously invisible because your awareness was locked in narrow third-dimensional bandwidth. The fourth signal is soul memory activation. Information flooding into your awareness about who you are beyond this lifetime, why you incarnated now, what your soul mission actually is. This knowing isn't coming from books or teachers. It's arising from deep within, from access to quantum information field, where all your soul's experiences across all lifetimes exist simultaneously. You're remembering because you're approaching the frequency where individual soul memory and universal consciousness memory become accessible rather than remaining blocked by third-dimensional amnesia that most humans experience. The fifth signal is energy sensitivity amplification. You can feel other people's emotional states, sense the frequency of spaces before you enter them, know immediately whether something or someone is aligned with your highest good. This isn't developing psychic ability. This is natural function of fifth-dimensional awareness, where everything is recognized as energy first and form second. You're perceiving the quantum field directly, rather than only perceiving the physical manifestations that appear after quantum waves collapse into definite form. The sixth signal is relationship reorganization. People who've been in your life for years suddenly feel foreign, incompatible, impossible to connect with on any genuine level. Not because you or they have changed as personalities, but because you're literally vibrating at different frequencies now, and frequency determines who you can resonate with. Simultaneously, new people are appearing who feel immediately familiar, deeply connected, like you've known them forever, even though you just met. This is frequency matching in action. Quantum Earth gathering the 1% into clusters of resonance in preparation for the full transition. The seventh signal is the pull towards something you can't name. A knowing that you're meant to be part of something vast, something transformative, something that will change everything about how reality functions. You can't articulate what it is exactly, but you know with absolute certainty that you didn't incarnate just to live ordinary life, just to follow conventional path, just to repeat what everyone else is doing. That knowing isn't ego or delusion. That's your soul recognizing the quantum event you contracted to participate in before you took physical form. And the eighth signal is that you're here, reading these words, feeling them resonate at level that goes beyond mental agreement or disagreement. Recognizing yourself in what's being described, not as information you're learning, but as truth you're remembering. The quantum field doesn't deliver transmissions randomly. If this found you, if you're still reading, if something electric is moving through your awareness right now, you're already among the 1% being activated for the transition, whether your conscious mind fully grasps what that means or not. Write in the comments how many signals you're experiencing, just the number, 3 signals or 6 signals or all 8. That acknowledgement does something quantum. It locks in the frequency. It confirms the activation. It tells your consciousness and the quantum field that yes, you recognize what's happening. Yes, you're ready for what's coming. Yes, you're willing to let everything that's not vibrationally aligned fall away, so you can transition with Earth into fifth-dimensional expression rather than remaining in third-dimensional construct that's completing its cycle. To understand what quantum Earth actually is and why only 1% will experience it, you first need to shatter everything you think you know about physical reality, about planets, about matter itself. Because quantum Earth isn't a place you go or a planet somewhere else. Quantum Earth is this Earth, this same physical location in space, existing simultaneously at multiple frequencies, with most humans only able to perceive the frequency band that matches their consciousness level. And what's about to happen is that Earth is shifting into frequency band most humans can't perceive, leaving them experiencing a version of Earth that appears to be the same planet, but is actually completely different quantum reality. Think of it like television channels. Same television, same screen, but completely different programs broadcasting on different frequencies. You can only watch the channel you're tuned to. Someone watching channel 3 and someone watching channel 103 are looking at the same screen, but experiencing totally different realities. That's what's happening to Earth. Third dimensional Earth, channel 3, and fifth dimensional Earth, channel 5, exist simultaneously in the same space, but they're completely different frequencies of experience. Most humans are locked into channel 3, the 1% has tuned into channel 5. And when the bifurcation completes, those on different channels will be unable to perceive each other despite occupying the same physical coordinates. Quantum physics proves this is possible through the many worlds interpretation developed by Hugh Everett. Every quantum event creates branch point where reality splits into multiple versions, each containing different outcome. The reality you experience depends on which branch your consciousness observes and collapses into manifestation. Up until now, collective human consciousness has been largely unified, observing the same reality branch and experiencing consensus Earth. But as consciousness fragments into different frequency bands, humans are beginning to observe different quantum branches, experiencing different versions of Earth despite being in the same physical location. This is why your reality might be getting dramatically better while others' realities are getting dramatically worse. Despite living in same city, same time period, same planetary circumstances, you're not just having different perspectives on the same reality. You're literally experiencing different quantum realities that happen to share physical coordinates but exist at different vibrational frequencies. Your Earth and their Earth are diverging at quantum level, and when the split completes, when the frequencies become too incompatible to maintain even the illusion of shared reality, the two Earths will be completely separate experiences, accessible only to consciousness vibrating at matching frequency. Fifth dimensional Earth, quantum Earth, isn't heaven or paradise or reward for spiritual achievement. It's simply Earth experiencing itself at higher frequency, where quantum laws that were hidden in third dimension become obvious and accessible. Where matter is recognized as consciousness, crystallized into form, and therefore malleable through consciousness. Where time is recognized as construct, that consciousness can navigate non-linearly, rather than being trapped in linear progression. Where separation is recognized as illusion, and everything is experienced as interconnected unified field expressing through infinite variations. But here's what's crucial. Quantum Earth isn't being created in future. Quantum Earth already exists. It's been existing alongside third dimensional Earth all along, just at frequency most humans couldn't perceive. What's happening now is that quantum Earth is becoming the dominant frequency expression of planetary consciousness, and third dimensional Earth is becoming secondary frequency expression. Like radio station changing its primary broadcast frequency, the old frequency doesn't disappear immediately, but it becomes harder to tune into, fainter, more unstable, until eventually it ceases broadcasting altogether and only the new frequency remains. The 1% is simply those whose consciousness has already tuned into the new frequency. They're already perceiving and experiencing fifth dimensional Earth, even if they don't have language for what they're experiencing. They're the early adopters, the frequency pioneers, the scouts who crossed over first to establish the vibrational template that makes it easier for others to follow. But as more consciousness tunes into fifth dimensional frequency, that version of Earth becomes more solid, more stable, more real in experiential sense, while third dimensional Earth becomes more unstable, more chaotic, more nightmarish as it completes its cycle and prepares to either transform or dissolve completely. Right now, you're standing at the threshold between dimensions. 1 foot in third dimensional Earth that you've known your entire life. 1 foot in fifth dimensional Earth that's emerging into your awareness through synchronicities, miracles, and experiences that shouldn't be possible according to old reality's physics. The bifurcation point, where you must choose which Earth to fully inhabit, which frequency to stabilize in, which reality to commit your consciousness to experiencing, not through decision in mental sense, but through allowing yourself to be pulled by the frequency that resonates as home versus clinging to the frequency that's familiar but no longer feels alive. Can you feel that pull? That magnetic draw towards something you can't see yet but know is there? That's quantum Earth calling the 1% home. That's fifth dimensional frequency, inviting you to let go of everything that's completing and step fully into what's emerging. That's your consciousness recognizing the reality it incarnated to help birth into collective experience. The question isn't whether quantum Earth exists or whether you're qualified to experience it. The question is, will you answer the call, or will you ignore it and remain in the familiar reality that's dissolving? 3 years ago, I experienced what I can only describe as spontaneous quantum shift. Not gradual awakening, not progressive spiritual development. Instantaneous transition from one version of reality to completely different version. As if I'd switched channels without intending to, and suddenly everything was different despite looking superficially the same. The laws of physics that had governed my experience my entire life simply stopped applying. Thoughts manifested instantly. Time became fluid. Synchronicities became so constant, they stopped being synchronicities and started being just how reality worked. I knew I hadn't gone crazy. I'd shifted into quantum Earth frequency. What I didn't understand at the time was that the shift wasn't random or accidental. It was the result of years of internal work happening beneath conscious awareness, releasing density, clearing conditioning, raising base frequency. Until I hit threshold and consciousness quantum leaped from third to fifth dimensional expression. Like water that gets hotter and hotter gradually until suddenly, phase transition, it becomes steam. I'd been heating gradually through every spiritual practice, every difficult experience, every moment of choosing consciousness over unconsciousness. And when I hit 100 degrees Celsius quantum mechanically, I didn't just get warmer, I transformed completely. After the shift, I started perceiving two Earths, not as metaphor but as lived reality. I could see third-dimensional Earth, the one most people were experiencing, becoming increasingly chaotic, increasingly dense, increasingly nightmarish as collective fear and unconsciousness amplified. But I was no longer experiencing that Earth, except as observer watching from different frequency. My personal experience was quantum Earth, synchronistic, miraculous, flowing, where things worked through consciousness rather than through effort, where reality responded to being rather than to doing, where fifth-dimensional physics were obvious and accessible in every moment. At first I thought maybe I was special or chosen or had achieved something through spiritual practice. But as I encountered others who'd made similar shift, and there were more of them than I expected, I realized this wasn't about individual achievement. This was planetary event. Earth was bifurcating at quantum level, and those whose consciousness had reached matching frequency were automatically transitioning into fifth dimensional expression, whether they understood what was happening or not. We weren't creating quantum Earth. We were discovering it, tuning into it, beginning to inhabit it, even while still physically present in same geographic locations as those experiencing third-dimensional Earth. The most shocking aspect was that people experiencing third-dimensional Earth couldn't perceive what we were experiencing, and increasingly we couldn't relate to what they were experiencing. Not just different perspectives, completely different realities. They'd describe circumstances as terrible and getting worse. We'd look at same circumstances and see them as perfect catalysts for transformation. They'd say times were dark and humanity was doomed. We'd perceive unprecedented light flooding Earth and mass awakening accelerating. We were looking at same planet, same moment in history, but experiencing diametrically opposite realities based entirely on consciousness frequency. This is what I wish someone had told me 3 years earlier, before the shift. That quantum Earth wasn't future event or distant possibility. That it was happening now, that the split was already occurring. That the 1% was already transitioning into frequency band that most humans couldn't perceive yet. That the chaos and breakdown everyone was experiencing wasn't evidence that world was ending. It was evidence that third-dimensional reality was completing its cycle while fifth-dimensional reality was being born. And depending on your frequency, you'd experience that transition as apocalypse or as ascension, as ending or as beginning, as death or as rebirth. Your experience of the last few years reveals which Earth you're on. If everything has been getting darker, denser, more difficult, more hopeless, you're experiencing third-dimensional Earth completing its cycle, and your consciousness is still locked into that frequency. If everything has been getting lighter, more synchronistic, more magical, more full of possibility despite surface chaos, you're experiencing quantum Earth emerging, and your consciousness has already begun transitioning into fifth-dimensional frequency. Neither is hallucination or delusion. Both are real. They're just different quantum realities existing simultaneously, accessible based on consciousness frequency. The shift I experienced isn't special or rare anymore. It's becoming more common as more consciousness hits the threshold and quantum leaps into higher frequency. You might be next. You might be in the process right now without recognizing it as shift rather than as breakdown or crisis or dark night. Every attachment that's being stripped away, every identity that's dissolving, every structure that's collapsing, all of it is preparing your consciousness to handle fifth-dimensional frequency without fragmenting. The shift doesn't happen to unprepared consciousness. It happens when you're ready, whether you feel ready or not, whether you understand what's happening or not, whether you consciously want it or not. Now that you understand what quantum Earth is and how the shift happens, the question becomes practical. How do you ensure you're among the 1%? How do you stabilize in fifth-dimensional frequency rather than falling back into third-dimensional patterns? How do you consciously navigate the transition rather than experiencing it as crisis or waiting for it to happen to you randomly? Because understanding the mechanics is different from embodying the frequency, and embodiment is what determines which Earth you actually experience when the bifurcation completes. The first key is releasing density. Third-dimensional consciousness is characterized by density. Heavy emotions, rigid beliefs, attachment to physical matter as primary reality, identification with separate self as real rather than as temporary perspective. Every moment you spend in dense emotional states like fear, anger, resentment, victimhood, you're reinforcing third-dimensional frequency in your field. Not as moral failing, but as vibrational mechanics. Dense emotions are literally heavy, low frequency, third-dimensional by nature. Fifth-dimensional consciousness cannot maintain itself in presence of chronic density. You have to let it go, not through bypassing or suppressing, but through feeling it completely and releasing it rather than storing it or identifying with it. The second key is expanding beyond linear time. Third-dimensional experience is locked into linear time, past leading to present, leading to future in sequential progression. Fifth-dimensional experience is non-linear time, all moments existing simultaneously, accessible through consciousness rather than through waiting for time to pass. Every time you're mentally living in past or future rather than fully present, you're reinforcing third-dimensional time structure. Fifth-dimensional frequency activates through presence, being so completely here, now, that past and future become accessible as present moment phenomena rather than as separate times you're trapped outside of. The third key is practicing energetic sovereignty. Third-dimensional consciousness looks outside itself for validation, for information, for authority, for permission. Fifth dimensional consciousness recognizes itself as source, as authority, as creator. Every time you give your power to external sources, government, media, experts, leaders, even spiritual teachers, you're operating from third-dimensional victim consciousness. Fifth-dimensional sovereignty means trusting your direct knowing over any external voice, means recognizing that reality is responding to you rather than happening to you, means taking full responsibility for your frequency and your experience rather than blaming circumstances or others. The fourth key is embracing paradox. Third-dimensional logic is either or. Something is true or false, right or wrong, possible or impossible. Fifth-dimensional consciousness operates in both and. Multiple truths existing simultaneously. Paradox is being natural rather than problematic. Every time you need reality to make logical sense according to third-dimensional rules, you're blocking fifth-dimensional perception that sees beyond apparent contradictions to the unified field where all possibilities coexist. Practice allowing reality to be simultaneously multiple things that third-dimensional logic says can't both be true. The fifth key is following frequency over form. Third-dimensional decision-making is based on external factors, logic, practicality, others' opinions, conventional wisdom. Fifth-dimensional decision-making is based on internal resonance. What frequency you feel when you consider different options. The choice that makes logical sense might feel contracted and heavy. The choice that makes no logical sense might feel expansive and alive. Fifth-dimensional consciousness follows the expansion, trusts the resonance, lets frequency guide even when form doesn't support the choice. Every time you override your frequency guidance to follow external logic, you're choosing third-dimensional reality over quantum Earth. The sixth key is dissolving the illusion of separation. Third-dimensional consciousness experiences itself as separate. Individual self, separate from other selves, separate from nature, separate from source. Fifth-dimensional consciousness recognizes unity. One field expressing as many, one consciousness viewing itself from infinite perspectives. Every time you strengthen boundaries between you and other, you reinforce third-dimensional separation. Every time you recognize the other as yourself in different form, you activate fifth-dimensional unity. This isn't about losing discernment or boundaries. It's about recognizing that the separate self is temporary perspective rather than ultimate truth. The seventh key is becoming comfortable with not knowing. Third-dimensional mind needs to know, to understand, to have answers and explanations. Fifth-dimensional consciousness rests in mystery, in not knowing, in being okay with reality that exceeds mental comprehension. Every time you need to figure everything out, to have it all make sense, to understand before you trust, you're operating from third-dimensional mind. Fifth-dimensional frequency activates through surrender of knowing, through trusting what you can't understand, through following guidance that doesn't make sense to mental processing. These aren't practices to do occasionally. These are ways of being that either stabilize fifth-dimensional frequency in your field or reinforce third-dimensional frequency. You're making the choice moment by moment through how you respond, what you trust, which reality you give your attention and energy to. The 1% isn't those who get everything right or achieve spiritual perfection. The 1% is those who consistently choose frequency over form, presence over past, future, sovereignty over victimhood, unity over separation, expansion over contraction. Not perfectly, but predominantly. Not always, but most of the time. Until fifth-dimensional frequency becomes baseline rather than exception. Something happens after you begin consciously choosing fifth-dimensional frequency that most teachings don't prepare you for. You enter what I call the between space, not fully in third-dimensional Earth anymore, but not yet stabilized in quantum Earth. You're existing between realities, between frequencies, between worlds. And this between space can feel like you're losing your mind, like everything is fragmenting, like you don't know what's real anymore. But this isn't breakdown. This is breakthrough. This is the necessary passage that everyone goes through when transitioning from one-dimensional frequency to another. In the between space, physical reality becomes unreliable. Things appear and disappear. Time stretches and compresses. Memories shift. People change in ways that seem impossible. You might be talking to someone and suddenly they feel like a completely different person, as if they've been replaced by alternate version of themselves. That's because you're flickering between timelines, experiencing the quantum superposition where multiple realities exist simultaneously before collapsing into one definite experience. Third-dimensional consciousness doesn't have access to this perception. You're seeing what's always been true, but was hidden by limitations of third-dimensional awareness. The between space also means relationships become impossible with those who haven't begun their transition, not because you or they did anything wrong, but because you're literally vibrating at incompatible frequencies now. Conversations that used to be possible become exercises in futility. You're speaking different languages even when using same words. They're referencing third-dimensional Earth and you're referencing quantum Earth, and neither can fully perceive what the other is experiencing. This isn't failure to communicate. This is frequency incompatibility becoming so extreme that connection is no longer possible across the dimensional gap. Most people experiencing the between space think they're doing something wrong, that they've failed spiritually, that they need to fix themselves or try harder or figure out what they're missing. But the between space is a natural part of the transition. It's the quantum state where your consciousness exists simultaneously in multiple realities before collapsing fully into fifth-dimensional expression. The disorientation isn't pathology, it's transformation. The confusion isn't evidence you're lost. It's evidence you're exactly where you need to be in the process of shifting from one version of Earth to another. The key to navigating the between space is surrender. Not passive giving up, but active allowance of the process to unfold without trying to control or understand it. Your mind will want to grasp, to make sense, to establish certainty and stability. But certainty and stability are third-dimensional needs. The between space requires trust in uncertainty, comfort with instability, willingness to not know while reality reorganizes itself around your new frequency. The more you resist the between space, the longer it lasts. The more you allow it, the more quickly consciousness stabilizes in fifth-dimensional expression. During this phase, you might experience what looks like dark night of the soul. Everything that gave your life meaning might seem pointless. Every identity you've built might feel false. Every goal you've pursued might appear meaningless. This isn't depression. This is the death of third-dimensional self, the dissolution of ego structures that can't survive in fifth-dimensional frequency. Your consciousness is being stripped of everything that's not vibrationally compatible with quantum Earth. And what's being stripped often includes things you thought were essential to who you are, things you can't imagine living without, things that defined your sense of self and purpose. But here's what's crucial. What's dying isn't you. What's dying is the limited version of you that was constructed to survive in third-dimensional Earth. The real you, the consciousness that exists before and beyond all identities, is being liberated, not destroyed. You're not losing yourself. You're losing the costume you've been wearing, the character you've been playing, the role you've been performing. And underneath all that, what remains is what you actually are. Consciousness itself, free from limitation, ready to express fully in fifth-dimensional reality, rather than remaining constrained by third-dimensional rules. 5 years into my own transition, I still have moments where I slip into the between space, where reality becomes fluid and unstable, where I can't tell which Earth I'm on, where everything feels simultaneously real and unreal. But those moments are shorter now. the return to fifth-dimensional stability happens faster. And I've learned to recognize the between space not as problem to solve, but as confirmation that consciousness is actively navigating quantum realities, that the transition is ongoing, that stabilization in fifth-dimensional Earth happens gradually through repeated cycling between states rather than through one permanent shift that never wavers.